Yes, good morning to one and all present here. So this is Dr.R.VENKATESH, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Ramco Institute of Technology, Rajapalayam. So in the last class, we have learned about the unit testing and the integration testing. In today's class, we are going to learn about validation testing. Before we entered into the validation testing, first of all, we know what do you mean by validation. So validation is the process of checking checking whether the software product is up to the mark or not. So it is the process of checking the validation of the product. So that is it check we are developing the right product or not. validation is the uh, Validation is the checking the product of actual and expected product which is set by the customers. The validation testing, it begins at the end of the integration testing and unit testing when the individual components have been exercised. This means whenever the product is tested by the unit testing concept, after that only the validation testing is begins, and the software is completely assembled as a package, which means whenever we complete the integration testing after successful testing by the integration, after that only the validation testing is started. And whenever we are covered the interfacing errors and the interfacing errors are covered, after that only we should start the validation testing. Normally this validation testing is focused on user visible actions and user visible recognizable output from the systems. So the validation testing is defined in many ways, but the simple definition is the validation succeeds when the software functions in a manner that can be reasonably expected by the customer, which means the validation testing is successfully completed whenever the user expectation is should be satisfied or not. So that is the validation success. So the validations, it must check the all software functions. It's said to be the expectations are defined by the customer. It must be satisfied. The user expectation, who or what is the arbiter of the reasonable expectation. So first of all, what do you mean by user expectations? The user expectations are normally defined in the software requirement document. So already we have learned in the unit 2 software requirement document. In the requirement document, yeah, it must be stated that the user expectations and the user requirements, all the user requirement, it must be stated in that requirement document. Now this software requirement specification should be developed. The software requirement specification SRS document, it must describe the all user visible attributes of the software and contain the validation criteria section that forms the basis for a validation testing approach. So the requirement specification document, it must be described the all user expectations. And so the validation testing is compare the actual product and the expectations by the user product. It must be compared, it must be checked if the actual product, it must satisfy the all requirement which is defined by the user. So that is the validation testing. So now we are going to cover the validation test criteria. In the validation testing, there should be a set of test criteria are there. So this slide will explain the test criteria. The software validation is achieved through a series of tests that demonstrate conform with the requirements. The software validation is must confirm the requirements collected by the user. This test criteria is contained the test plan outlines. The test plan outline, it must classes of test conducted. What are the classes of test to be conducted in the validation testing? It covers the test plans. Next, the test procedure define the set of specific test cases that are designed and to ensure that all functional requirements are satisfied. So we have to define the test procedure. So this validation test, it must cover the validation test procedure also. This test procedure to ensure that all functional requirements are satisfied or not. Next, all behavioral characteristics are achieved. In the requirement document, the user will provide a set of characteristics, behavioral characteristics. So, all the behavioral characteristics are achieved or not in the software product. It must be validated. So, next, all content is accurate and properly presented. So, the presentation and accuracy, it must be defined in the test document, requirement document. That is also to be validated. Next, performance. So, the software product performance, it must be validated whether the requirements are attained or not. So the document, next point is the documentation is correct. So the prepared document is validated or not, it should be correct or not, that also we have to ensure. So the final point is, the final criteria is the usability and other requirements are met, which means transportability, compatibility, error recovery and maintainability, platform dependence and independence. So all the other requirements are met or not. So these are all the validation test criteria. So in this criteria, it said that to ensure all the requirements are met or not. So, if any deviation from the specification, this specification defined by the user, if any deviation from the specification is uncovered, so that is noted as a deficiency list. So each and every document, it must prepare and maintain a deficiency list created. So this deficiency list is contain the deviation from the specification. So a method for so that all the deficiency must be recovered. So the recovering deficiency is must be established. So a method for resolving deficiency must be established. So this is the one of example of deficiency list. So like that, all the product document, it must maintain a deficiency list and how to recover the deficiency. So that must be established. So next, another element of the validation test criteria is the configuration review. First of all, we all know about the review. A review means, so the review, the entire, so review the any product or any item. Once we review the product, means it will discover the all errors or findings in the item or product. So that is the thing. So a configuration review is an important element of the validation process is a configuration review. So the intent of the review is to ensure that all elements of the software configuration have been properly developed, have been properly designed, have been properly cataloged, and have the necessary detail to strengthen the support activities. So the review procedure to ensure that all the elements are properly designed and properly developed or not. So the review process will review the entire content in the software product. So that it said, so all the requirement process and all the product, it must be satisfied or not, it should be reviewed. Okay. So next is the configuration review, sometimes called as an audit. So next we are going to learn about the alpha testing and beta testing. It is the one among the important step in the software testing. So whenever we complete the integration testing, unit testing and the validation testing, and finally we are going to did the alpha testing and beta testing. So after successful completion of alpha testing and beta testing, the software is ready to release. So next, alpha and beta testing. So in previous days, they are using acceptance testing on behalf of alpha and beta testing. The acceptance testing means the user will did the many operations to accept the software product. So that is known as acceptance testing. So it is virtually impossible for a software developer to foresee how the customer will really use that product or program. The end user or a customer, how they are going to use that end product or program, so that the instruction for use may be misinterpreted. A strange combination of data may be used. Output that seem to be clear to the tester may be unintelligible to a user in the field. So how the user will use the product in the user field. So that is described by the acceptance test, alpha and beta testing. First of all, we are going to learn about the acceptance test. So first of all, what do you mean by acceptance test? Yes, when the custom software is built for one customer, a series of acceptance tests that are conducted to enable that the customer to validate all requirements. So first of all, we have to validate the all requirements. To ensure that the functional requirements are satisfied or not, the customer must do the acceptance test whenever we are using the custom software. So that is, the acceptance test conducted by the always the acceptance test is conducted by the end user rather than the software engineers, so that the end user will discover any errors are happening while using that product, so that the acceptance test is must conducted by the end user. So it acceptance test, it can range from informal test drive to planned and systematically executed series of tests. In fact, the acceptance testing, it can be conducted over a period of weeks or months. It depends upon the user and depends upon the software product. This acceptance test can be over the period of weeks or months, thereby uncovering the cumulative errors that might degrade the soft system over time. So next we are going to learn about the alpha testing and beta testing. There is a difference between alpha and beta. So now we are going to learn about the alpha testing. If the software is developed as a product to be used by many customers, so it is impractical to perform a series of acceptance tests with each and every one. So now we are developing a custom product. So the custom product, we could not check the each and every customer place by doing the acceptance test. So that the most of the software companies and most of the software product, they are using the process of alpha testing and beta testing to uncover the errors that only the end user seems to be able to find the or discover the errors. So first of all, we are going to learn about the alpha testing. The alpha test is conducted at the developer's site by a representative group of end users. So while doing the alpha test, the end users are there and the customers are also there and the developers are also there, but the test which is done by the customers at the developer side on behalf of developers. The developer should not test the product, the end user going to test the product by their knowledge, but the developer will provide the guidance. The software is used in a natural setting with the developer looking over the shoulder of the users and recording errors and usage problems. While the end users test the product, the end user will discover or finding any errors or any difficulties to use the product. Those should be identified the developers and record the errors, and finally those errors are completed by the developers. And alpha tests are conducted in a controlled environment. Normally, the alpha tests are conducted at the developer side only, so that the alpha tests are conducted in a controlled environment. And on opposite side, the beta test is also there. The beta test is conducted by the end user at the end user place, which you mean by the beta test is conducted at one or more end user sites. Unlike alpha testing, the developer generally is not present. The test which is conducted by the only end user and supported by the end user only. The developer is not present in the customer sites. So therefore, the beta testing is a live application environment. Lively, we are going to use that product. By using the product, the the user will discover the errors. All the discovered errors are records, and it must be sent to the developers in regular intervals. So recorded errors are, it must be completed by the developers. It must be recovered by the developers. As a result, the problem reported during beta test, you make any modification and then prepare for release of the software product to the entire customer base. The customer perform a series of specific tests in an attempt to uncover errors before accepting the software from the developer. Normally, the customer, it performs the series of tests. It begins from the acceptance test, alpha testing, beta testing before accepting the software product from the developers. So that the validation testing, it should be used to validate the entire software product. The developers are prepare and develop the correct product or not. So for the purpose only, the validation testing could be conducted in all type of software product. So that's it. Thank you.